Hi guys, Brian here, and today I wanted to talk about why I think it would be great for H2K to sign Febiven. Now, I know that as this video is being released, this isn't official yet. There's a big post that a lot of people are talking about that Jacob Wolf released an article on ESPN stating that through his sources, that Febiven is signed for H2K. Now, this is November 28th. As of now, if you're watching the video, this might be stated that this actually happened or this hasn't happened. It seems like it's true. But even if it isn't, I think this still warrants a discussion. The community is very divided on whether they think that this is a good move for H2K or not. So I just wanted to bring up my reasons why I think this is a good move and kind of see what you guys are thinking. Now, I'm going to start right off the bat with the biggest reason why I think this is a great move for H2K. And this is because this opens up an import slot for H2K. Right now, while H2K had Ryu, they had one import slot open, but now without him, they have two. If this were to happen, they would have to. I'm going to talk about the rest of this video as if this happened, but like I said, this isn't official yet, but it's just better for the flow of the video. Anyway, so H2K, if this were to happen, would have two import slots. Now, I know a lot of people were talking about possibilities like Hachani and Arrow from KT going to H2K. But I'm not even going to talk about whether I think that H2K should get Hachani and Arrow, or whether or not H2K should re-sign Febiven or Vander or both of them. I just want to bring up that this is a big possibility that people are talking about because this is huge. Now that H2K has two import slots, they can import a whole bot lane together. They no longer have to import like an AD carry or a support. They can import both of them together, which means that they'll have intact synergy. Now, looking at other past things, when people import just one person, like say look at Liquid with Piglet, they just imported an AD carry. Now, AD carries from other regions have different, there's so much different between the region they are and the region they are playing in. There's cultural differences, there's language barriers. Even if they speak English, they're not from Europe or America, wherever they were imported to. So they get a huge advantage by being able to import two people from the same region. If they decide to import a Korean, they can also import a Korean support, which is huge. They'd have this intact synergy that if they import just the AD carry and keep Vander, the Vander and this AD carry wouldn't have. They wouldn't both be from Korea or China or wherever they decide to import from. And not only can they do that, they can also import two people from the same team. Like, for example, people were talking about Hachani and Arrow. They've been playing together for a while, and they already know that they can play well together. They both know that they can communicate together. They played very well in KT. So you have this huge opportunity that H2K, with 3 out of the 5 people, if they were to sign Febiven, locked, you can look anywhere for these two people, and you can grab them from the same team. You know they have synergy together. You know there won't be a language barrier if you at least get them from the same region, and no cultural barrier. So that is huge. They can go to the team together. They already have a set of friends that they know they will have, and somebody to communicate with, some camaraderie, and that's huge. So I think that's really important, and a lot of people are overlooking just how big that is. But I'm going to also go away from the import slot because I want to talk about Febiven on H2K. Because a lot of people have been talking about, especially Febiven's bad behavior. There's been a lot of news circulating, like stories that Febiven wasn't the greatest teammate on Fnatic and all this stuff. So we're just going to go into what I think about that. Now, H2K as an org has dealt with bad player behavior before. Now, I'm using asterisks because what I don't want to look inside, I don't want this to be an in-depth look about how Febiven or Febiven were inside Fnatic or H2K. People said he's been hard to deal with, and people said he's not the best teammate, but this is just an overview. And I'm looking at Febiven here, because Febiven supposedly had behavioral issues. Now, like I said, one thing to note with all this with going behavioral issues is we weren't there. The only people that know this for sure are the people with first-hand knowledge that were actually inside the team when this happened. All we hear is hearsay. Now, you can base conclusions off a lot of hearsay, but I don't really want to go into that. But I'm just saying that if you're looking at it from an overview, H2K has dealt with this toxic player in Febiven before, right? He was there in the spring split, he left, and he came back, and at Worlds, everything looked like it was going like together. Things were melding, they were doing a lot better, they were living up to the expectations they had before. And H2K apparently knows how to deal with this. They did it with Febiven, one of like the poster bad boys for Europe, right? He couldn't get along with teammates. Everybody said that he was toxic. Svenskeren didn't want him when they were in SK Gaming together. But apparently H2K knew how to do something, or now at least has experience with it, and they were able to turn him, at least for Worlds, into somebody that people could work with. So if this is true about Febiven, if you're willing to bite the bullet and say that he is a bad teammate, you're probably going to bite the bullet and say the same thing about Forgiven, right? Well, as we've seen as an org in H2K, they were able to at least curve his mentality for a bit and get him to work with his teammates. So if you think that he's going to have that issue, H2K might be one of the best teams for him to go to because they've already done it before. And also another thing to look at is with Febiven on Fnatic, League of Legends is a 5-person team, and it's a 5-person environment, but it goes past coaches. It's a 5-person team, but the environment goes past to the organization. We have the coaches, we have all the analysts that also feed into this environment that's on the team. It's not just these 5 people. So we can look back at Season 5, Febiven never had these issues come up at least. He could have changed, people changed, that's true, but we have 2 sample sizes that show that at one point in Season 5, there was no issues with the team. And in Season 6, he had all these issues that people were rising up, but the only person that was really left was Reckless. Like Daylor left, Yellowstar left, came back. All these changes happened, new jungler, new top laners. So it's hard to just pinpoint it on Febiven, right? And maybe Febiven was a bad teammate, super toxic and everything, but maybe all these changes that happened inside Fnatic led to this. Maybe it's too hard for him. He's young. All these people are young. You have to remember that. So just because even if he was, toxic at Fnatic, there's more people contributing to that. So putting him in a new environment doesn't mean that he's going to have some of the old issues because all these variables are going to change. Oh, and by the way, a point I wanted to bring up earlier too about H2K working with toxic people, and this brings up the point I'm talking with too. Febiven was on H2K before. So they already know how he is. Granted, he's grown a little bit, he's changed, but he used to play for H2K. So H2K as an org knows what they're going to get with Febiven. They, at least mostly, they have a good idea. So they know if they think they can work with him, how he's going to be like. They have a rough estimate, a better estimate than most other orgs would probably have. So if they think they're willing to go and get him, and they think that he can change his personality to fit with his team, they'd have a pretty good idea. But like I said, it's more than just Febiven. Even if he was a toxic teammate, this is the only time we've seen this come up. So another thing I wanted to talk about, besides Febiven's player behavioral issues, is whether or not Febiven is an upgrade to Ryu or not. Now, I know a lot of people have been looking at Ryu's performances, basing it off last Worlds. And Ryu did look pretty good at Worlds, barring his Samsung Galaxy series. In the group stage in the first series against Albix Nox, Ryu looked pretty good. He was one of the better performers on H2K for most of the tournament, I think. Ryu also shot calls too, which is a big thing, which we don't know if we'll really get with Febiven, but I'll go into that later. But Ryu looked pretty good. But I want to look more into this because I don't really think Ryu had the hardest competition for mid lane. Let's start with the two. He didn't really face any world-class mid laners up until he faced Samsung Galaxy. And then look at what happened in the Samsung Galaxy series. He was non-existent. Ryu played pretty poorly. It's almost like he wasn't even there for some of the game. For some of the series, rather. So, not slighting Ryu. I think he's a good player. But if you want to get further and you want to make this Europe super team, you're going to need people who can stand up to world-class mid laners. So now, the point I was trying to bring up before, let's go back and look at who he played at Worlds, because I don't really think any of these players were world-class. Now, let's start with the first team that somebody would bring up in this world-class argument, which is probably Scout, because EDG was the biggest team coming into the tournament. Now, EDG and Scout both didn't really live up to the hype that they had coming into Worlds, because a lot of people thought EDG could be one of the, again, like every year, thought that they could win the tournament. And I think Scout played pretty well, but I don't think Scout is any world beater, especially with how he played at the tournament. I think Scout was one of the better players on EDG at Worlds, but I don't think Scout showed anything that wowed me. Scout didn't show me anything that made me think he could beat Faker, or he could beat Crown, or any of these, or like Bjergsen, any of these top mid laners at Worlds. And I don't think Scout's performance backed that up at all. And then another mid laner you have to look at that Ryu played is Westdoor. Now, I think honestly that Westdoor, since he can't get his comfort picks all the time, like this Fizz and TF, his play hasn't been that great. if you just look at the tournament, he didn't make any crazy plays. He didn't lead his team to victory like Ryu did. In some of the games, Ryu kind of like hard carried. Westdoor didn't look that good. And then those are the two top mid laners he played besides Crown. Look at the other ones. Talkers from INTZ and Kira from Albus Nox. Now, no slight to these guys, but like I said, the point I'm bringing is these are not world-class mid laners, and they're probably worse mid laners than your Scout and your Westdoor. Well, all that's really debatable because I think Kira's actually pretty good, but still, these aren't world-class people. You're not going to see these guys go to Korea, right? And then, so I don't think Ryu's level of competition in the Worlds was actually that good. So I'm trying to give his Worlds performance that most people are thinking of a little asterisk and say, well, he didn't have the greatest competition, and then when he did, he didn't really show up. And like I said before, if you want this European team to finally get past the semifinals, you're going to need somebody who can stand up to these world-class mid laners. Now, I don't think Febiven's performance last year was really indicative of how good he is as a player, because it looked like Fnatic as an org was really kind of like collapsing from the inside. But if you look back to what Febiven used to be a year ago in Season 5, he did solo kill Faker and MSI, the team that won Worlds that year. I don't think his level of performance was up to that this year, but he's still young. And that's another point I want to bring up too, is that Febiven is almost 3 years younger than Ryu. It's about 2 1/4, I believe, 2 and a few quarters. But he's still younger than Ryu, and he has a lot of time to grow. And League of Legends, where careers are so short, almost 3 years is a huge time. That's a big gap of space that he could grow that Ryu doesn't have. And since Ryu left KT Bullets back in Season 3, Ryu hasn't hit that peak. It seems like he's been steadily declining. I think his play at Worlds is actually a big spike up for how he was performing in the summer split of Europe. But I don't see any signs that Ryu's going to hit that, mid playing in a top 2 team in the world performance level again. And for those of you who don't know, Ryu played on KT Bullets back in Season 3, and when they didn't make it to Worlds, but they played in the Gauntlet final between SKT, in which most analysts thought whoever won that game, or that series rather, was the best team in the world. And it went to a 5-game series, and Ryu was playing pretty well on KT at that time, but unfortunately for them, they didn't beat SKT. And he looked really good on KT, but hasn't shown that level since. And it seems like it's been steadily declining. Where with Febiven, I really think that he can hit that peak again that he hit in Season 5. One, considering he was so young, that was really his rookie split. And two, because it's really hard to perform well when you have all these internal issues that Fnatic apparently had. So I think that given that Febiven is so much younger than Ryu, and he's not as far away from his peak as Ryu was, everybody can have a bad split and still come back and bounce back. But with Ryu, there's not as much excuses for him. It looks like he hit his peak in Season 3, and we have some data Season 4, 5, and 6 that he doesn't really seem to be getting back to it. So we could also look at their performance in the Europe Spring Split, numbers-wise, because Summer Split rather, sorry, because Febiven obviously didn't go to Worlds, so you don't have that comparison. Now, looking at numbers-wise, Febiven had the 3rd highest KDA of any mid laner in Europe at 4.1, which is 2 spots over Ryu, who was at 3.8. He also averaged Febiven did also averaged CS per minute of 8.6, whereas Ryu was the last spot at 8.3. Now, Ryu also had some comparable stats, because if you were to look at all these if you were to look at all of these numbers and where they fit in each position, you can see that they're pretty close. The stats go back and forth. Ryu was in front in some, Febiven was in front in some, but it seems to mostly come out with a whitewash. Like for Ryu, he has more kill participation than Febiven. Ryu's was about 2% better, even though Febiven did manage more kills, less deaths, and Ryu only beat him by assist by 1. But honestly, in all of these stats, Ryu and Febiven were actually pretty close, and it's also worth it to note that Febiven was on a worse team that really seemed to not know what they were doing. So I really wanted to bring up all these reasons because a lot of people were calling Febiven a downgrade to Ryu, and that this move is the Alliance 2.0. And if you don't know what the Alliance move was, it's alluding to the fact that when Reckless left Fnatic, he joined Alliance, and they just went downhill, and then Reckless eventually came back to Fnatic, which is what they think Febiven might do. Performance-based, I think a lot of people think are too focused, on Ryu's performance at Worlds. He did have a pretty good Worlds. He had a monster performance at Worlds against every team that wasn't Samsung Galaxy. But he wasn't against the greatest competition. And when he did go against this world-class competition, his performance left a lot to be desired. And looking back at the spring split of EU, Febiven and Ryu really played on a similar skill level. I think a lot of people forget that Ryu didn't look the greatest in the summer split of EU. And if I keep saying spring split, I meant summer split. Sorry about that. I just talked about the spring split topic not long ago. That's why it keeps coming up. But I think they really forget that Ryu and Febiven, I think Febiven actually looked better in the summer split than Ryu did, especially since he was on a worse team. But they were pretty similar, I think. Most people just remember that Ryu looked very good at Worlds. The one slight to Febiven, seems that he's lacking, is we don't really know his shot calling prowess. Most interviews in H2K, the team talks about how Ryu, leads the team. He tells them what to do. So that is something that will be missing without Ryu. But I really think that Jankos and Otawamne can really fill in that void, especially Jankos, because he's in the jungle position and there's so much that the jungle can dictate. And I think they're both really smart players. And it shows by the fact that H2K went out of their damnedest to get those two first. They wanted Jankos and they wanted Otawamne, so they signed him and they snatched him up before anybody could. And I just wanted to also reiterate the fact that Febiven is younger. Ryu doesn't seem to be living up to his KT days. And I think Febiven still has a lot of room to grow. I know a lot of people are worried about Febiven's toxic behavior, but H2K has already worked with Forgiven. And if you're going to buy that Forgiven being toxic and H2K fixed it, then you can also buy that Febiven can go to H2K and they can fix it too, especially since Febiven's already been in the org before. And even if Febiven doesn't perform to the level of Ryu was at Worlds, and this is a slight downgrade, I think it's worth it for the chance of a slight downgrade. And I think he'll be better, but even if he is a downgrade, it's worth it for the 2 import slots. This is really the biggest thing, and I just wanted to harp on it again, because having 2 import slots and having you have out of your 5 people, you have 3 people confirmed, and you have 2 import slots open. That's huge. That means you can really do anything you want, especially with these 2 import spots being AD and support. You can guarantee, if you want to, that these 2 players have played together. That's insane. That's what G2 did with Sven and Mithy. That's huge. They can really, they have the world as their oyster. They know their bot lane can communicate well if they want them to, and they can choose to stay in Europe if they want. They can choose to go to Korea, China, anywhere they want. Taiwan, the world's their oyster. So I think that's the biggest thing that this really grants them. I think it's huge if Febiven does actually join H2K. I think Febiven will do well. I think his behavior won't be an issue. I think that he'll perform better than Ryu did, and he's young. He has room to grow, and he looked like a monster in Season 5. He really did. At Worlds and MSI, he stepped up to Faker, killed him in lane. And this really has a chance to be an EU super team. Now, I know we said that about H2K last year. And toxic behavior did have the fall in their spring split where H2K finished 4th. Everybody thought they were going to be one of the best teams. So this has a chance of happening again, right? It's hard to predict how this team will work unless they're actually there and you see it happening. You see it unfold behind you. And there's still this big if of who they're going to get for the last 2 spots. But I think paving the way, if you could have 3 out of 5 players signed and you can get 2 imports for your AD carry and bot, almost any team would take that. Almost any team would take Jankos, Otawamne, and Febiven and have 2 import slots. That's crazy. That's such a great chance to do well. You have so much laid out in front of you. So yeah, I really think that H2K should sign Febiven. I think it would be a great move. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. I want to know what you think would work if they sign it and what wouldn't work, because it couldn't work. It's always a possibility. Like I said, you never know what's going to happen until all 5 players are playing. The curse of the paper roster. It looks good on paper, but doesn't look in LCS. But that's it, guys. Sorry for the long spiel, but I just wanted to talk about that because I've been thinking about it all day. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and comment. And if you want to see more videos about topics like this, because I'll be trying to cover everything in the off season, going into the spring split, talk about anything League of Legends, because it's the game I love. If you want to see more videos like that, please subscribe. It really helps out. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.